Hey everyone, we're gonna talk about what Wizards of the Coast has recently said about D&D canon and how anything before 5th edition is no longer considered canon by them. Um, so let me just read this article. Um, Dungeons and Dragons novels, video games, and other spin-offs are not canonical to D&D role-playing game. And it says, let's see. While speaking to media last week ahead of its D&D live event, lead rules designer Jeremy Crawford discussed the canon of Dungeons and Dragons, particularly when it comes to popular novel series such as the Dragonlance novels by Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman, or the Drizzt novels by R.A. Salvatore. Or is it Salvatore? Actually, I don't know. Um, for many years, we in the Dungeons and Dragons RPG studio have considered things like D&D novels, D&D video games, D&D comic books as wonderful expressions of D&D storytelling and D&D lore, but they are not canonical for the D&D role-playing game, Crawford said. Part of that is we don't want DMs to feel that in order to run the game, they need to read a certain set of novels. We want you to read them for the joy of reading them, but not as homework. Okay. Um, so let me just read this part because that is an important argument going forward. Crawford elaborated with an example from his own childhood, using the Dragonlance novels as an example. I started playing D&D as a kid, and I ran the original Dragons of Despair, the first Dragonlance adventure model, which actually came out before the novels did, Crawford said. For me, Dragonlance has always been a wonderful D&D war story where every DM gets to play through their own version of that war story. Well, I mean, they did, as a side note, they did railroad it a lot apparently, but whatever. And then the novels are one way where that story plays out. That's how we view all D&D novels. Crawford also noted that they would dive more into the idea of D&D canonicity in a future developer blog post in the coming months. And you know they did it. Okay, this one last part I'll read as well. Then I'll get into my opinions. While the idea that the foundational novels that help to build worlds such as Kryn or Faerun might not exist within official canon, Crawford said that this decision ultimately brings the focus to the story that the dungeon master and the players want to tell when playing Dungeons and Dragons. When it comes to the RPG, what's important is each DM's story and the story they create with their players. Crawford said, the moment you are at the game table, it's no longer our Dragonlance or our Forgotten Realms, it's your Forgotten Realms and it's your Dragonlance. You're now telling your stories in those settings. You're not bound to the stories in the novels, as wonderful as they might be. We hope you take as much inspiration from them as it gives you joy to do so. The same goes for D&D video games or for D&D comics. Okay, well, I basically read a good chunk of the article, which was not really my intention here, but I feel like it was. I kind of realized as I was reading it, it was important for setup. So, um, first of all, I should have seen this coming because I bought the recent Ravenloft book, and they gender swapped and race swapped a lot of characters. So obviously that already doesn't fit with the old novels. Although what I thought it would be, I kind of saw it in my, well, it was two things. I kind of saw it as sort of like a soft retcon. Like sometimes like you have a retcon of continuity. It's not like you're rebooting or getting rid of everything like in before. You're just like changing one detail, but everything else is kind of the same. So everything that So what if I forgot their names, the twins that train under Van Richten um, are race swapped. Like the stories are still the same, so you just okay, you change the race and let's move on, you know. So that's kind of how I saw it, where it's not like, oh, everything else is canceled. You know, like D&D has had plenty of soft retcons over the years. For example, Dres Do'Urden, um, as the Drow were handled differently in rules over different D&D editions. There's aspects when you read the old novels. There's aspects of how what the Drow could do, and you know how it worked when they went out into the surface. It kind of like when you read those original Driss novels, it's different from later portrayals of the Drow. So it's not like and you know, when you have something that's been going on for so long, like Doctor Who, for example, you know, like of course you're gonna have soft retcons. That's unavoidable, and then people can agree or disagree about those changes, you know. But it's I want to establish that the fact that Ravenloft had changed some things around. Um, Nevertheless, I didn't see it as this proof of a reboot for D&D since fifth edition. I didn't interpret it that way. Maybe in retrospect, I should have. I was gonna say it as their desire for diversity kind of trumped over canonicity in a way, like where they just consider this real, whatever one's opinion might be of gender swapping or race swapping characters. I just also interpreted it as just real life. It was really important to the people working the book, either for actual their actual personal morals or for the appearance of some morals. That was that important to them that they would do that, even though it contradicted old Ravenloft novels. Um, and then when you read those old novels, you just have to maybe imagine the characters a bit differently. Or in the case of the is it Mordenheim, the Frankenstein stand-in? Then you maybe have to imagine a few more differences in the end, you know. And then when I'm reading a novel with Strahd, I have to imagine that he looks like a purple drow for some reason instead of Bela Lugosi. But okay, you got my drift. Like soft retcons do happen when a continuity has been going long enough. Contradictions or changes to modernize the story are inevitable, but you still have a feeling of continuity nevertheless. There is no, continue something long enough, especially a shared universe, and contradictions will show up, or stuff will be changed. You know, like so. I want to say right away that soft retcons don't mean reboot. You know, that's one thing to keep in mind. Um, one example, I don't know, it's like in the Warhammer novels, Felix and Gotrek. Um, Felix in the novels described as having a mustache, and in the old covers they would give him the mustache. And now, I don't know why they decided to remove the mustache from Felix in those covers, but even in those, I don't know if now Felix is written as not having a mustache, but even in the covers of those old books, he doesn't have it anymore. But in the text, he does. So unless they went to edit it, I don't know. So the modernized Felix as not having a mustache anymore. You know, like that. As far as soft retcons go, that one is pretty harmless, right? Or I mean, like meaningless. Anyway, so yeah, so the what Ravenloft did, especially because of characters like Xander Sunstar, like the vampire elf, where in the new Ravenloft book, they went out of their way to kind of like explain maybe contradicting stuff that happened to a character over um, many years of source books, where maybe what White Wolf did with the character wasn't the same that Wizards of the Coast did with the character in fourth edition in an adventure. So it's kind of like there are a few contradictions, or at least different ways that the character was used. And I don't know if there were contradictions outright, but there were definitely different takes that people took with the character. And in the new Ravenloft, they kind of explained away that there's now many versions of Jander Sunstar out there. So the fact that they went out of their way to explain that, if it's a reboot, you know what I mean? Like that's also why I didn't see Ravenloft as a reboot, because of that one part. If it was a reboot, they would just write gender sons or whatever way they wanted. But the fact that they went out of their way to establish that told me that it wasn't meant to be this full on reboot, but just here's a few soft retcons here and there. We're changing characters a little bit, or a lot, whatever your perception of that may be. It might be. But then also Ravenloft, the last one, is a book that really contradicts itself because there's one part where it says that it's important to not make the game humorous if you want to keep the horror mood, and then a few pages later they say that there's no wrong way to do horror. You can even do it comedy, like so. You can see there were many cooks in that kitchen when it came to the last Ravenloft book. So maybe for some people in there, canon was really important, and other ones were like, nah, canon doesn't matter. Let's just modernize it, or at least our perception of modernism, of a more modern game. And then when it comes to reboots, sometimes you don't have a choice. Like if you look at something like DC Comics, for example, um, because their characters don't age, they're always in modern times. At some point, like stories from 20 years ago, like at this point, um, for example, any of the Robins who have been around, like let's take the most recent one, Damian Wayne. Oh no, now it's back to Tim Drake. Anyway, for those who don't know comics, okay, the youngest of the Robins, if that's correct, started in 2006. He first showed up. Now we're like, you know, many years later, more than like we're 14 years later. Um, no, 15. Sorry, I'm tired. Can't do basic math right now. So we're that many years later, 15, and he'd be an adult in his 20s if he had age in real time. So that's just an example. Like Bruce Wayne would be how old? Well, he'd probably be dead of old age at this point if we like he started in the 30s. So um, there's some stories where you have no choice but to reboot, or if the source, like if the franchise is like a movie franchise and it's centered on a specific character where you can't just have that person replaced that character, then you have to recast with another actor. For example, like Batman, you have no choice in movies. You have no choice but to reboot Batman every few years. James Bond, etc. So I'm not saying reboots are this bad thing overall in every single case, but I do think they're a bad thing for D&D because you don't need to reboot D&D. It's not like none of it's not supposed to be set in the present with unaging characters. It's set in this fantasy world, and it can advance in time as slowly or as quickly as the company wants it to. So that's not an issue. There was no like reboots can be needed and necessary sometimes, but uh, a fantasy setting is not, which is a shared world. It's not one where reboots are needed. And certainly can get unwieldy, and sometimes some stuff will age poorly. And sure, you can use soft retcons or just start. You can ignore some stuff, or just do something new that might have a few contradictions here and there. But overall, people can kind of like turn a blind eye to those contradictions to kind of like, look, it's still the same story continuing. Let's maybe change a little something in our head about that specific detail, and it's fine. Okay. Um, and it's just this thing where you look at it and why did they do it? Why do people mess with continuity all the time? And then the arguments, and a lot of people share those arguments, and they're like, oh, this is why, and it totally makes sense. So let's go over some examples that we've been given over the years where it was actually a really bad idea, and then I'll go back to D&D. Okay. So let's take Star Wars, the expanded universe that existed before Disney bought Star Wars. And yes, I know some people will say that George Lucas was the only official canon. Everything else was kind of like not really canon. But actually, if you want to get into that, the expanded universe had this complex. There were levels of canon to everything. So unless something was contradicted, it was canon. It was kind of like how it worked. So it was kind of interesting how they handled it, and it was kind of fun in the sense that the person who came up with it tried to make sure that even stuff that wouldn't be canon would still bring something to the universe. For example, like I think the last level of canon was like stories don't really count, but whatever technology was brought up is still part of the universe. So whoever came up with that level of canonicity was still like really nice about it. Where if someone worked on something Star Wars, like they still brought something to the actual world. If I remember correctly, it's been a long time. So like it wasn't a yes or no thing with Star Wars canon back in the day. And in fact, I would even dare say that George Lucas, since he wanted an expanded universe in the first place, since he approved of it, should have been more careful to not contradict it himself in some choices he made later on, especially during Clone Wars. Somewhat with the movies, but especially with the Clone Wars, some stuff really started contradicting established expanded universe stuff. But again, like like what if this detail changed? It could kind of be explained away by another writer coming up with like a good idea for how to explain it, stuff like that. For example, even within the Disney canon, the fact that in the Mandalorian, the fact that he couldn't take off his helmet, but in the Clone Wars we had seen Mandalorians do it, and it's supposed to be in the same canon. In season two, they just explain it away with others different um, branches of Mandalorians. It was that easy, So with good writers, like whatever contradictions, you can kind of explain them away if they're big enough that it needs explaining, if it's necessary, if the fans really need an explanation. Um, so all of that to dismiss this whole notion that expanded universe wasn't canon. It was, unless George said that this detail was. So, um, yeah. So what did Disney do? They said, okay, you know what? Only the movies count, and everything else doesn't count. But going forward, everything we do will be canon 100%. I didn't like it back in the day, but I was part of one of those who decided to give it a chance because I understood back then. I understood, but we'll get to that. I understood that it was necessary. It was necessary because they want to bring back the actors, and oh well, like they can't do any original stories with the movies that are there, and Chewbacca's dead now, and all these reasons, and oh my god, people have to catch up with all these books to keep up with what happened in the movies. No, it makes no sense. It's true. And you know what? This levels of continuity thing, yeah, it's a bit messy. Maybe just having one single canon will be better. Okay. And then when the movies came out, you realize that you were completely lost. Nothing was explained. The filmmakers were dropping mysteries that they had no answers for, and it was a whole mess. And then you realize, okay, wait, so you still have to explain what all the characters have been. You still have to explain their sons and daughters and like all those things. Um, so I realize they didn't need to get rid of the expanded universe because also the expanded universe sure had gone um, in the future beyond Luke, Han, and Leia's era, but it had kind of like jumped way ahead. And as far as the stories with Lucan and Leia, where the books were in the expanded universe, it was where the actors were in age. So they were really careful to not go beyond that, actually. So you could have easily had Luke, Han, and Leia just show up, and be the new movies could have been part of the expanded universe. And you know what? It wouldn't have been any more confusing than what we got. Actually, what we got was more confusing because there were all these mysteries, but they weren't like set up in a smart way, and we had no answers for them. And even now, writers are trying to, through their new books and comics, they're trying to explain stuff away after the fact, which I think it would have been much better to just, like for example, Jaina Solo, the daughter of Han and Leia in the expanded universe, instead of Ray, who, in my opinion, was not that good a character, you could have had Jaina Solo be the young hero of the new trilogy if you want a female lead, and she's part of the expanded universe. And it's not that confusing to say what needs to be said for that movie. You don't need to go through all the novels that she's been in. You just explain, oh, she's the daughter of Han and Leia, and you tell whatever story you need to tell. Chewbacca's dead, but you can bring him back either as a clone or just explain how he actually survived the novel Vector Prime, the first novel of the New Jedi Order. So you kind of realize actually that this excuse that oh too much the canon's too unwieldy is a crappy reason, seeing how they made it confusing anyway. And at least if they had kept the expanded universe, people with questions could have had gone to those old novels for answers instead of being left in confusion now. Like with the new Disney canon, like all the new fans were completely confused. It wasn't like oh, I can't wait to see what the answer to this mystery is. It was more like, are they gonna explain that at all? And they often didn't in the movies. So you kind of realize how it was a bullcrap reason. And then, for example, another example of even though I used it earlier as an example of a place where reboots might be necessary, DC Comics, when they did the New 52, it was so bad because they rebooted everything, but they kept some stuff from the old continuity, other stuff they didn't, and even writers didn't know what stayed or not. And then they also, but they didn't start from the beginning. Except for in Justice League, they showed some stuff from the beginning of that new canon, of that new continuity, but then they skipped ahead, so you had all these established characters, but no one knew their backstory. Not the new readers, not the old readers. So the fact that these were all number ones, they weren't new reader friendly because new readers still had all these characters' backgrounds they didn't know about them, and now even old readers didn't know anymore what counted or not. So everyone was left confused. So again, the fact that these reboots help, they don't, because now when people look up online whatever character, they have to contend with like two different continuities now, and it's not like when you're talking about movies, for example, yeah, you can have Michael Keaton's Batman, you can have Ben Affleck's Batman. It's kind of easy to differentiate those two, right? But if you're talking comics, or whatever, for example, Star Wars canon now, when people look up what did Luke Skywalker do after Return of the Jedi, they have like two different versions: the Legends version, which I'll just call Expanded Universe, and the Disney version. And like as a quick side note, I don't like the Disney canon that much because of what they did with the original characters, and they had no plan going in. It was obvious. So like I don't like that Han was still doing the same thing he was doing as a young man, as a much older man. I prefer what in the expanded universe he progressed as a character. I prefer Luke who um, did a lot more in the expanded universe than he did in the Disney canon. And Leia. I mean, what they did with Leia in the new movies, obviously it was kind of weird how they had to handle it, but that was more like real life stuff that happened. Um, because Carrie Fisher sadly passed away. Yeah, Leia was I think was the one character that they were respectful to in both versions. And again, Chewbacca, like if you had kept the expanded universe, just clone him, and you don't need to mention the movies he's a clone, or just explain how he actually survived. And the one who died was a clone. I don't know. Let's go Spider-Man clone saga with it. Who's the real Chewbacca? Um, yeah. So now back to D&D. This idea that because what kind of frustrates me about this is people who don't care about it have no respect for those who care about the canon. Um, and and I'm going to explain why it's not a good argument anyway. But first of all, like if obviously when people do their games, they should do what they want. They shouldn't be beholden to official canon. But it's nice to have the official canon there. It's nice and it's fun. And if you've invested, like I read the old Ravenloft books when Soth meets Strahd, Lord Soth goes to Ravenloft, and all those stories were cool to me. Like I like Janner Sunstar, and um, even though you have blogs like Grotesque and Dungeonesque who mock the old Ravenloft novels, and those blog posts are really fun to read, I still enjoy them a lot. Like all those stories I read in the Forgotten Realms, and Now that I'm older, like, I can certainly see how the my taste in fantasy, like, now I kind of seek different writers, different styles, a bit more meaty, but I still enjoy that canon of D&D. So what does that mean? There's an emotional attachment there. Like, I don't need um, Robert K. Morgan to who wrote a Land Fit for Heroes to write Forgotten Realms book, or Ravenloft books. Like, it's fine. I don't expect that. Um, but my point is, like, yeah, there's an investment there. Like, I don't need them to be the most perfect books. I just remember enjoying them when I was younger, and they were important to me, and they're part of the D&D experience for me. So now, people who say, "Well, do whatever you want with your games," of course, that's also what I've always done. I've never tried to keep up with all of the continuity. Actually, I don't even use established settings that much, or ever. But then, if you don't care, what do you care what the books portray or not? So, like, people who don't care, like, why do they have to be, like, kind of poking people who cared, like, what does it matter anyway? Well, it matters to some people. Respect that, or not. You're entitled to your opinion, and to certainly criticize others if you don't agree. But if you didn't care in the first place, just let it be. Let people who did care have their say, I guess. But that said, it's still, I think, a flawed opinion. What do I mean by that? Is because it's kind of like those tabletop RPG books that are system agnostic. It's basically, oh, this is a tabletop RPG book, and some of them are really good. Okay, I just want to be clear on that. That's without a system, without rules or any system. And my opinion on those is that uh, I did get some of them over time. Some of them are good, but what I want to say is, um, why would I buy a source book? Well, maybe so the homework is done for me. Like, maybe I want these NPCs to be statted for me. I can easily come up with some by myself. I don't have problems with my imagination. I just want the homework to be done for me sometimes. So when I see something system agnostic, it can still have a lot of value, but then I'm like, oh, it's kind of like half of the job done to me. And yet, people who say, well, I don't care about the system anyway, in that case, you can grab whatever book. It doesn't matter if it has a system attached to it. See what I mean? So whoever's system agnostic in mentality, like, they can grab whatever book from whatever system. It's not going to matter. But for someone like me who appreciates having the system in there, um, then yes, it has value. Then you see how it's not equal. And just to be clear, there's role playing books like Icons that are so rules light in creating the character. It's so easy and fast and not complicated whatsoever, and yet you can do pretty much everything with Icons. That, yeah, I can grab a source book, a superhero source book from any other superhero tabletop RPG system, and get inspiration and just easily create new stats for that villain, just as an example, or that hero, whatever NPC. So it's not like I don't do it myself, but I just mean, like, there's more value if it does, to me, in my opinion, there's more value if the homework is done for you. So that's an example where I found, like, the one side going, like, it doesn't matter, should just leave the side that says, well, it matters to me alone, because then it does matter to someone. If it doesn't matter, it's not like a different opinion matters to you. It's just, it doesn't matter to you. Therefore, why, leave alone the people who don't mock them. Um, because I see a lot of cockiness about that. People who are like, oh, there are people who are stuck up about the canon. Yes, we are, because it's, look, we invested emotionally over many, like, I'm almost 40. I started reading these things when I was 20. That's 20 years of my life, of memories and fun. And okay, sure, then the next argument is like, oh, those books are not going anywhere. You can still read them. You can still, yeah, but let me tell you something. The Star Wars Expanded Universe stopped existing. No, I don't think they're gonna stop the wrist books or anything like that, but it's kind of, I think it's almost a matter of principle. It's like a slap in the face to the fans. It's like, Now, the Dragonlance example, those were adventures. I get it. You can't, if you're doing the same adventures as novels, yeah, there's gonna be like their own version at the table. But at some point, if you're doing a source book on this place, you should keep to the continuity. If you're doing a source book of the city, Waterdeep, you should keep to what happened before. And the argument against keeping canon is that, oh, people feel like they have to read all these novels. You know what? That's easily fixed, and it's much better than insulting all the all-time fans and getting rid of everything that came before. You can accomplish that simply by making a point of it in the book. In the source book, you can say, like, you can address it like there's many novels about it, but at your game table it shouldn't matter. It's your game when it's on your table. And you can even, just to make it feel like people are allowed to do it, you can even have like examples of how you can change the setting. What if Elminster is actually not a good guy but a plotting evil mastermind, like a Palpatine type? And then you give examples of how to kind of change the setting so even long-time players don't see stuff coming. So you cannot give permission by putting it in book already, and then you fixed it. You just tell people you don't need to, without canceling all the canon. Now, again, something else that contradicts what all those people say is that what's interesting to me is that Wizards didn't say, "Oh, there's no canon at all." They said the canon is starting in fifth edition. So it's not even like they're meant. So see how it's very hypocritical in a way. It's not that there's no canon and every book is a fresh slate, like a clean slate. Sorry, a fresh start. No. It's, you still have that continuity. Just only fifth edition counts, which is a slap to the face to the all fans. Really, is what it is. Whether it was meant to or not. Maybe some clarification will happen in the days to come, maybe not. But this is my true, honest, immediate reaction to it. Um, some of these arguments and thoughts I made are kind of like complex to explain in a video while trying to keep it short. I hope I've done a good job of it. If you have any questions about any of the arguments I brought up, or you want clarifications, or even to argue me, it's fine. If we can keep it respectful and just not agree, it's cool. Just leave comments. Leave comments, please. I would love that to discuss this with everyone. And that's pretty much it for this video. That said, if like and subscribe, all that stuff. If you would like to see me doing actual plays for older editions of D&D, or variants, using the Open Gaming license, you can find my actual plays at Chronicles of the Crimson Hound. Chronicles of Crimson Hound. It's in the description down below. And hey, this is completely in another direction, but if any of you also happen to like mixed martial arts, I got another channel called Bruno's MMA Show where I talk about mixed martial arts. So yeah, that's pretty much it, and I'll be looking for the comments. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. I try to keep it short, but it's already past half an hour, so we'll stop there. Thanks. Bye.